Hello friends, we are here in the last chapter of the book of James. This is James chapter 5. Now there's 3 sections in this chapter, but the first 2 kind of go hand in hand. They're kind of looking at 2 different sides of the same issue. And so the first is talking to the rich people, and then he's talking to the poor people. And really what he's saying here is he's talking about people that are putting all their faith and trust in this world, and the people who are putting their faith and trust in the world to come, the afterlife, not to being here. It kind of goes along with what was said in the last chapter. To be a friend of this world is to be an enemy of God. And so he's kind of like explaining that here. So he's talking to the rich, and he's saying, your riches are going to spoil, they're going to corrode. And this chapter kind of reminds me of what it says in 1 Corinthians, where it says, if you build your life on straw and hay and sticks and gold and silver, the day of judgment will come, and the fire will come, and it will show what's going to last and what's not. And in this place it says, you've built your life up with silver and gold, and it's going to corrode. And what I think is really interesting how it says, its corrosion will also corrode you. And it says, it will eat you away like fire. That if you build your life up of things of this world, the things of this world are all going to die and go away. They're going to corrode, they're going to fall apart. But he's also talking about how the rich people, they kind of exploit the people that don't have riches. They take advantage of people. And I love the way that it explains it. It reminds me of the place in Genesis where Cain just killed Abel, and it says, his blood cries out against you. And here in this chapter it says, the wages that you have taken away from your people, those wages are crying out against you. He's saying the same thing. Hey, bud. So this makes me think of, how many times have we done this? Now, I think it's important to note that there's a very few things that God says, this is an abomination. But taking money from people, that is definitely one of them. And it makes me think, how many times have we shorted people money? Like, we know we owe them money and we just don't. But what it really also makes me think of is when we buy things. There are things that you buy every day. My wife used to look at this list back when she was in college to make sure that she never bought anything that was using slave labor. And you might think, well, I don't do that. You probably do. If your bananas come from Belize, if your clothes, a lot of them that come from China, a lot of coffees use child labor and slave labor, most cotton. So the clothing industry is the worst. So, it's important to look at maybe where your clothes come from. And I'm not talking about people that don't make a lot of money. I'm not talking about regular, like, sweatshops. I'm talking about slave labor or child labor. As Christians, we should be the ones who are making sure that these things don't happen. And these are ways that, I don't consider myself one of the rich, as it's talking about here, but to some extent we're all the rich. Anybody who's watching this has a computer or a cell phone. We're all the rich. But then it starts talking about the poor. And to some extent, I think we're all the poor. It uses an example in this chapter of the way that we're supposed to be. And it uses Job, someone who was extremely rich. He was probably the richest person in his land. The way that James here is telling people, now don't be like the rich, where you put all your hopes and dreams in being in and of this world. He's telling the poor people, you just wait, because he knows that the poor people, they are putting their hopes and dreams in the world to come. They're putting their hopes and dreams in the world without end, in their relationship with God. And so, through that, we should do the same thing. Like a farmer waits for the rains to come. That's the way it's going to be for us. So he's saying, the poor people, you're in a good place, but it's possible for the poor people to put all of their heart and their minds into this world in the same way that the rich people do. And so he's saying, just wait. Stay as you are. Hope for the things to come in the next life, not in this life. And it mentions Job, and it says, remember how steadfast Job was. Even though he was so rich, everything he lost, and he was just like, though he, how does it say it? Though he smite me, yet will I worship him. The last section here is really just a call to prayer. It's interesting. It's saying, if you are miserable, then pray. And if you're not miserable, then pray. It says sing praises, but really what it's saying here is thank God for the good things. Pray for God when you're going through the hard things. And when you're ill, pray for God then have people come and pray for you. Sometimes people put a lot of emphasis on it says have the elders come and anoint them with oil. This was explained to me a long time ago that there was nothing special about this anointing oil. That back then, olive oil was used for medicinal purposes, and it still is today. But what he's saying is, give them medicine. If someone's sick, have them pray for them, but also care for them. And so he's saying pray in the good times, pray in the bad times, always be in communication with God. So it gives us an example of who we're supposed to pray like. It uses the example of Elijah. It says Elijah prayed fervently that God would bring no rain to the land. And it didn't rain for years. And then one day, he decided, okay, it's enough. And he prays for rain, and it rains. And this is an example of something that I say to myself all the time, and I hope you guys do too. It says, the prayers of a righteous man availeth much. That is a call to prayer, but it's also a call to righteousness. Sometimes I feel like I need to be a righteous man so that my prayers will availeth much. It's not saying that God doesn't listen to everybody's prayers. He does. But the prayers of a righteous man will availeth much. So at the end of the chapter, it talks about what it's like for someone who brings a sinner back to the Lord and how that's a great thing. But I just want you to remember the prayer. Make sure that you pray in all times, because the prayers of a righteous man availeth much. So anyways, that is James chapter 5. Have a great day. Bye.